What's up, everybody? Bobby Kaplan here with Bigger, Stronger, Happier. I have Xavi D from Organic Health Movement, and super happy to have you here as my first interview on my channel. It's crazy because we just connected like a month ago. Shout out to the internet for being able to find like-minded people. And do you want to just start off a little bit? And obviously, with my page and everything being more towards weight loss niche, I guess you could say, do you want to kind of just start off and give everyone a background on you and some of the things you've gone through and why I'm having you on as the first guest here?
Yeah, 100%, man. First of all, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. And super excited to share this time. So I started my health journey, you could call it, after my parents' divorce as a kid. I used food as a coping mechanism for the feelings of shame and guilt. This belief that I had caused the divorce, somehow I was responsible for it, somehow I wasn't enough. And having this deep need to fit in, but feeling left out, being bullied as a kid, it just kind of spiraled into this need to use food as a coping mechanism. So what's really interesting for me is that I think it was as much the food addiction as it was the emotional patterns of codependency and need that created this sheath of body fat to protect myself in the world. So as time went on, I've tried a few different things. I went to fat camp when I was about 12, lost weight, did severe caloric restriction, worked out all the time, really just kind of drove my body into the ground. And I did lose weight and I kept it off for quite a while. But then, of course, as a result of that, your hormones and everything is totally fucked. So you gain it all back because the underlying mechanisms of weight gain haven't been addressed, whether that's physiological or emotional. So I gained all the way back in high school and more, and I felt even more left out, more distant, more outcast, so forth and so on. I just felt like, fuck, like nobody knows me, nobody really understands me. I have friends here and there, but it's not the depth of connection I want. I'm not my best self, and so it's really frustrating. That led me to balloon up to about 260 at my heaviest, and I was 17 at the time. So I was a big guy, and I'm only 5'10", so I'm not super tall. And I realized, shit, I have to make a change. So I started a vegan diet. I thought, well, I can eat as much as I want when I'm vegan, so I'll try that. Then I went off to college, and everything hits the fan when you go to college, no matter how hard you try. So amongst partying and amongst just really kind of poor food options, I kind of maintained weight around like 220, 215 for a while. It wasn't until I left college, dropped out the first time around, that I came home to San Francisco and really committed myself to a plant-based diet, high quality organic foods, which had always been a staple of my diet, but really, really honed in on it. Really started to unravel a lot of the emotional issues that led to weight gain. And finally, after kind of joining a yoga training and giving up my habit of smoking way too much pot and really allowing that spiritual energy to come into the body, I was able to go through this transformational process of really healing, putting on muscle mass, training hard, really taking everything, mind, body, and spirit, aligning it. And as a result, I've become a coach, the owner of Organic Health Movement, and the rest is history, man.
Nice, dude. It's funny how like I said, we only knew each other for a month now, but I just keep finding more similarities. Like my parents got divorced too. I am probably 5'10". I'd like to say 5'11", but and my highest weight was 316, so I was even bigger than you. But yeah, I mean, we got the same car. We like gangster rap. We're in health. So it's funny. I didn't know your parents were divorced either. So,
dude, we're right there on the same wavelength.
Yeah. So I guess going into more of the holistic approach with, not only just life in general, I kind of want to talk about some nutritional stuff. So a big thing nowadays that everyone likes to use is the buzzword organic. And I don't know if a lot of people truly know what that means. So could you kind of dive a little deeper onto what organic really means and why it's better for you?
Would love to. This awesome example comes to mind. I was having a conversation with a friend who's like drinking Folgers coffee in front of me, and she was complaining about GMOs. And I was like, wait a minute, like time out. GMOs, organic, local, all these buzzwords that we've assimilated into our culture with very little understanding, they really trigger me because it's like, does anyone actually know what the fuck we're talking about here? So when it comes to organic, especially, Organic to me means that the food, well, let's just say the food and or meat, so produce and or meat, is raised ethically. It's grown in nutrient dense soils. It is grown without the use of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, etc. It's grown with high quality water by people who really care for the earth. It does not come from a monocrop. So it is not, like, you could grow organic wheat, but if you grow organic wheat all year long or in the same spot of land, you're really depleting nutrient variety in that portion of the soil. So true regenerative farming, which is a staple of organics, means that crops are rotated. There is a time and a place to use the benefits of certain plants, let's say in harmony with the season, in order for the soil to maintain its quality, in order for the future harvest to maintain their integrity. And unfortunately, we live in America, right? So here we grow a lot of corn, a lot of soy, and a lot of wheat. And those are not only usually genetically modified, meaning the seeds themselves have been altered in their genetic expression to express different traits. It could be resistance to pests, it could be resistance to drought, it could be resistance to freeze, all these different things that technically you may want, but actually really degrade our health when you look at the effects of those foods on our body, and ultimately really degrade the soil quality such that we can't grow nutrient dense foods as we once did. So for me, organic is super important because not only is a way of giving back to the earth, but you ensure that the quality of the food that you bring into your body is of the utmost, we could call it the utmost variety as well as quality. And in the process, you feed your being, you improve your vitality, longevity, and you're supporting the earth, the ecosystem that literally gives us the ability to breathe, move, think, and be.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you brought up the GMO part because I think so frequently today people are obsessed with like doing the top tier thing right when they have all the other layers of the pyramid wrong. And that for me is why I find holistic approaches so beneficial because it's not like how many calories should I eat? It's how many hours of sleep are you getting? What are your relationships like? What is your stress management like? What's your life dream and life nightmare? You know, it's not a lot of people just want to do that surface level thing. And like you said, even going back to your childhood, if you don't address the deeper rooted things, the top tier things don't mean shit. And what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, absolutely, man, because you can eat the best nutrient dense organic food diet. And if you're a shitty person or you have a ton of unresolved emotion, it really won't make that much of a difference.
Right. And what is your opinion on eating locally? And is it better? What do people need to look for as far as are they better off just going to a farmer's market? Are they better off getting things that are labeled organic in the store? What's your opinion on that?
Well, one of the issues with organic labeling is a lot of organic certifications are owned by large multinational corporations that have invested their time and their energy in the organic market because it's expanding so quickly. And that presents quite a bit of a problem because, as you mentioned in the challenge, there's certainly the presence of organic certifications wherein the soil quality has not truly been tested. The residual pesticides, herbicides, so forth and so on from past use on a plot of land have not been identified nor fully reintegrated, or let's just say the soil quality has not been improved to the point at which they're not present. And a host of other factors wherein just a certified organic label may not actually ensure that the food you're eating is high quality. It's certainly going to be better than most, but you have to be really careful with that. I think of a brand called Cow Organic, for example. And the irony is they grow their organic carrots, for example, which are almost never fresh and come from a part of California where there is just massive amounts of agriculture. So all the kind of residues from these sprays of chemicals will translate to a field not too far away, right? And if you're growing organic carrots next to like a soybean farm, or let's say a corn farm, or almonds is a big one in California, right? And you're spraying all these chemicals in order to keep pests down. Look, like nature is an integrated closed loop, so it's not hard for those chemicals to travel. So for that reason, organic certifications can be kind of troublesome. The best and highest quality certification is called the Demeter Association. They're not only certified organic, but they are also biodynamic. So any produce, any farm, any, let's say, small local CSA that sells Demeter certified produce is going to be the best, because the food is grown biodynamically, meaning it's truly grown in a sustainable fashion. It's grown with biodynamic practices. It's organic, so forth and so on. It's a whole lot better than just the USDA organic. To answer your question, though, after that long-winded explanation, it's important to buy from local farmers as well, because a lot of farmers can't afford organic certifications. And farmers markets are really a powerful place to go connect with your community and support the local economy. That's a really important thing to me. Because in order for this movement of organics and high quality food to take root, quite literally, pun intended, we need to support those who may not be financially affluent. Whereas these large corporations, let's say Kroger decides to make an organic cereal bar, they're not going to have any trouble doing that, Whereas the small local farm that is, raising chickens and is growing bok choy down the road, that might be struggling to get the word out about what they have to offer, really needs our help and our support a whole lot more than these big corporations. So for me, it's really important to support local farmers for the nutrient density, for the local economy, and just for a human moral perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, I have just gotten into going to farmers markets and stuff like the past 2 years, and not even regarding the health benefits. It's just fucking cool to know who makes and grows your food. You know what I mean? Like, to know the guy who's raising the pigs that you're eating, or to be down the road from the garden, or have a garden in your own property. It feels a lot more connected, if you will.
100%. And you get to befriend these people, dap them up every time you see them. It's just a good vibe,
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the good side of why you want to eat, organic, local. Can you kind of explain a little bit more of what makes highly processed foods bad, as far as, I know you know a lot about like seed oils and whatnot. So I actually made a post today, not a post, I just put it in my Instagram story. I think people would almost be better off just getting really good at reading the nutrition or the ingredient labels, like not even worrying about the macros, just starting to look at ingredient labels and seeing what is actually in the food.
Really well said, man. That's a big part of the process. Commonly overlooked and is kind of popular in like dieting weight loss circles, where it's like, well, you got to check the label to make sure that, like, how many grams of fat does it have? And that's really, you should be looking at the ingredient list, not the macros, like you said. That's really
100%.
important.
All right. I'll throw myself on mute and you can keep talking about that if you want.
100%. You can just splice this afterwards. So there are really three components, I would say, that contribute to the detrimental effects of processed food. Three categories of foods: industrial seed oils, so canola oil, rapeseed oil, soybean oil, sunflower seed oil, safflower seed oil, so forth and so on. They're highly inflammatory. They create a lot of oxidative stress in the system. They disrupt the gut microbiome. They're grown generally from poor quality genetically modified crops. They're highly rancid, which means that they tend to sit on the shelves for a long time. And when you look at for example, cardiovascular risk disease factors, inflammation is primary, right? And these seed oils that are commonly used in restaurants, that are used in traditional cooking, like margarine, for example, is not really a seed oil, but you can think of that as like a really low quality fat to cook with. Or you could also think of, going to a Chinese restaurant, they use soybean oil, which is pretty common. It creates a lot of havoc in the system. There are a lot of kind of potential hormonal disruption factors that are associated with the ingestion of these seed oils. So you really want to be careful with seed oils. And that goes for all fats, because even your coconut oil may be rancid, might be sitting on the shelf for too long. Likewise, your avocado oil. A lot of avocado oil is just basically a tiny bit of avocado oil cut with canola oil. And there's a fascinating study that Ben Greenfield published about a month and a half ago, detailing like 19 of the top 20 brands that were tested were basically canola oil. So it's pretty scary. Aside from that, avoiding industrial seed oils, we want to avoid processed sugar. Now there's some evidence, well, there's a lot of evidence to say that sugar wreaks havoc on the system, but the thing we want to consider most is quantity. So a little bit of sugar here and there is not going to kill you. And the type of sugar is important as well, but it's really the quantity of sugar that we consume in the US and you could call it modern Western culture. So basically the modernized society that we have been inculcated in is sugar addicted. Sugar is super inflammatory, wreaks havoc on our blood sugar, and blood sugar dysregulation is associated with numerous conditions. Sugar is super, super stressful on the system, especially in high quantities. And because it's such a reward-producing food, we eat way too much of it and often can't stop. So processed sugar is a big one you want to avoid. And the third would be processed wheat or processed grain, which whether it's wheat, which really causes a lot of issues for those with non-celiac gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, but also some of the other potential cross-reactants that we find in gluten-free grains like sorghum and teff. That can be even, from a kind of different plant species, but a potato, for example, or corn. These things can cause a lot of havoc for people who have non-celiac gluten sensitivity if they're reacting to the epitopes, because they can cross-react in the system, meaning that they interact with the epitopes of wheat and create an inflammatory reaction as if one was eating a lot of wheat, or the immune system tags them in the same way, creating an inflammatory response. So the three categories to break it down: processed sugar, industrial seed oils, and processed wheat. Processed grains are really, really stressful to the system, lack nutrient variety, lack nutrient density, and tend to create a lot of inflammation and can disrupt our gut microbiome, as well as a host of other factors that are associated with chronic disease states.
Yeah, and I think much like the term organic, the term inflammation is thrown around a lot. And for the longest, before I got into eating organic and local and regenerative farm and all that, I thought that, eating processed foods, but the right amount of macros and stuff, it was the same. I used to think it was the same. And the feeling of me feeling better was almost just a byproduct of me maybe losing a little bit of weight, knowing that I'm doing the right thing if I'm eating less calories, and not really knowing the difference between like processed food and organic. But once I started doing numerous trials of eating the same amount of calories as processed foods and the same amount of calories in organic and, locally farmed foods, I just feel completely different. And it's a big difference that I feel like is one of those things where it's hard to know what feeling good feels or feeling bad feels like until you know what feeling good feels like, because I always felt like I was tricking myself for a while into thinking that it's not the whole foods, it's the eating less calories and whatnot. But I promise you, the more whole foods and whatnot you eat, you will feel better. And it's just something you got to try for yourself.
Really well said, man. I would ask, and I would kind of wonder, do you feel like in retrospect, you've had a shift in focus? Because I can certainly resonate with this perspective. The shift in focus from how do I look to how do I feel, and aligning your lifestyle with that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I could just tell you personally from the aesthetics part of it, I went from 316 pounds to a 196.4 was the lowest I was at. And when I was that low, I felt like I was still fat. I had no, you know what I mean? I didn't have any confidence or whatnot. And now I'm back up at 270 and I'm trying to get lower, but I'm doing everything slow and sustainable and not really worried about hitting a certain number on the scale. And I just feel 10 times better. And I can attribute that to two things: is just the quality of food and also just strength training in general. Having more muscle mass is something that has just increased my confidence a lot. But I like you said, the quality, I can just tell from years of going back and forth. I just know now that the quality matters. You can't get around it.
Really well said, that. And I love that you said at 196 you felt like you were still fat. You know what I mean? It's really how do you feel in your body, and what is the emotional perspective that's contributing to that, right? I love it.
And, well, that's actually a good segue into kind of some other stuff I want to talk about mindset wise. And I know you have a lot of opinions about this and experience too. So what are some things that you could contribute on the topic of self-love and, outside judgment and all that?
Sure. So one of the most traumatizing things that we tend to experience in life is the word no. As children, we're told no. And that no is a deeply traumatizing shift from, I'll take it to the metaphysical realm, what I think is kind of an angelic entrance into the world where we have a deeply metaphysical, spiritual bond to the universe, a sense of oneness and a sense of levity, a sense of assurance, wherein whether that's, in vitro, or perhaps it's related to the inner emotional state of our mother, or perhaps it's related to our mother's interpersonal dynamics with other people, we can take on a lot of unresolved emotions, cellular memories from a spiritual perspective, ancestral lineages that can be very difficult to deal with. And a lot of people shut down as a result of that. So no, and this feeling of, disconnection, separation is really our sacred initiation into a much higher journey. Now, despite the fact that these things are painful. So I grew up in a family that had a lineage of addiction, whether that be to food or alcohol or drugs. So for me, being born into that lineage, I chose food as my addiction. And what was really interesting about that is I think from a higher perspective, I volunteered to experience that because it was very valuable for me to then turn around from a healed perspective and serve others in their awakening through those types of cellular patterns, we could call them. So for me, what it comes down to is we live in a world where people haven't really gotten over no yet. And people haven't really come to grips and terms with who they were before they heard that. And they have no recollection of that, which is a beautiful experience. You get to rediscover it all, right? But in the process of doing that, I think we fall into a lot of addictive patterns. I think we fall into tremendous codependency and inner emotional stifling. So we're very poor at communicating as a culture. We're very poor at being honest. We have a value system that's incongruent with what produces happiness. And as a result of that, we have tremendous strife in the world. And for me, it starts with one thing. It's saying, okay, cool. Let me just first acknowledge the cards that are on the table. Let me first say, yeah, I am codependent. I do experience pain. I do experience obsession, addiction, fear, anxiety, worry, all these different emotions that we all experience in different ways with different things and at different times. Just by acknowledging that and saying, cool, this is what I'm working with. And then rather than trying to go through this huge process, like, okay, I'm going to unravel this and I'm going to go to a therapist and I'm going to start working on this. It's like, cool. What if we just took a step back and said, yeah, like everything that I'm experiencing right now as my hyper-reactive response to that original no is valuable and is potent and is helping me become a better person. So to try to get away from it, to get rid of it, is actually to negate the gifts inherent in that thing. And by saying, cool, yeah, I'm fat. I don't like that I'm fat, but being fat is helping me cultivate a greater depth of self-love than I could if I was skinny. You see, oh, cool, this is here to help me rather than fighting against it. So to break that down and be very simple, my whole philosophy is we all have this traumatized no and this sense of rejection, separation, literally leaving the womb. We go on this hero's journey to reclaim our self-worth and our self-power. But one of the things that I see that most people get stuck on is not being able to reconcile the pain of the world with the depth of love that they are. And that by doing so, create greater union, greater harmony. And that process is what allows us to shift into a much better virtuous lifestyle.
Yeah, you said that great. I think we could both agree that for someone who is overweight, more than just 5, 10, 15 pounds, it's not food that's the issue. There's underlying problems. It's emotional. It's like you said, there's addictive things at play there. And when you just try and change your calories to lose weight, it's not going to work because you're not addressing the problem. And yeah, I think I forget where I was trying to segue that into, but I think what, my biggest thing is now when I look back on all the negative things in my life that I thought were negative, you know what I mean? I think a lot of people, I can't speak for other people, but I think there's a kind of a wish where people think that they could just like snap their fingers and all their negative experiences would go away. But if you didn't have any of the negative experiences, what would your life be? You wouldn't have any perspective. And I think a lot of people go through life wanting and hoping for all the good, but not realizing that in life there's polarity. And, like you talk about with the yin and the yang, you can't have the good without the bad. And the good won't be as good if you don't have some really bad moments. And they might be really shitty in the moment, but I can look back on some of the shittier parts of my life and realize how much that has molded me into me and my perspectives now and just my lens on life.
Extremely well said, man. I appreciate you expressing that. Appreciate you for going through that journey and coming out the other side, because a lot of people give up. And I'm grateful to have your wisdom here as an expression of that. Yeah,
man. So I guess if you want to talk a little bit more about if someone is stuck, I know a lot of your challenge you just had was about play and incorporating that in your life. If someone was stuck and they don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, what is a good place to how do you begin to get more introspective? And I guess if you want to bring kind of your perspective on play into it, you can as well.
Absolutely, man. I love the light at the end of the tunnel analogy, because so much of self-development and personal growth, I disagree with like 95% of what we're taught in the personal growth and self-development realm, because it's super outdated to what the world is calling upon us to cultivate, right? So in desperate times, desperate measures is one way you could look at it. But I actually look at it from a different perspective, which is to say, in times when we are needed, we need to feel loved, adored, and feeded. And so you could call it fed, right? We need to feel fed. And the way that we feel fed, the way that we feel nourished, is to say, cool, this light at the end of the tunnel, unto which I've been hustling and driving myself and, ultimately really sacrificing aspects of myself in order to get to, doesn't need to be at the end of the tunnel. I can bring it right here to me right now, simply by saying like, whoa, okay, look, I am not going to be able to show up in the world as the person that I hope to be, right? Because that person is somebody I hope to be. I can only show up in the world as the person I am. So that really courageous recognition of, okay, look, I am insecure. I do have pain. I do have unresolved emotions in the past, but I am going to show up as compassionately, lovingly, and wisely as I can in my relationships anyway. A lot of self-development is like, well, you can't enter a relationship and you can't start a business and you can't actually show up as a good person in the world until you're completely resolved. And it's like, I think that's an old lineage, an old way of looking at things from the perspective of people who are deeply damaged and are afraid to accept themselves as they are. So for me, from a practical perspective, it's like, okay, dude, like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I could say, okay, cool. I do have a lot of things to work on, but I'm going to go be my best self anyway. How do you actually do that? Well, for me, self-love practice is a very big deal. And self-love, I think, is commonly misunderstood as well. So I'll take a bit of time to explain it. Self-love is not the practice of changing the way that you are in order to be more accepting of yourself. Self-love is the practice for meeting yourself where you are and giving yourself what you've never been given before in the past, especially when it comes to those emotions. So I'm insecure right now. Oh my God. How did this happen? I just feel really insecure in this conversation. That could be an example. I actually feel pretty good in this conversation. So you're insecure and like, oh my God, what happened? Well, what would you have liked to have heard as a younger kid if you felt insecure? Not like, oh, you're a bitch, which is probably what you heard on the playground, right? You could instead say, I would have liked somebody to come over and put their hand on my shoulder and say, hey man, I totally understand that you're insecure. You have every right to feel that way. It's like, oh, awesome. Not words of affirmation like, you are so strong and you are so great. Because our inner child is like, fuck you, dude. You're not getting the point here. So self-love is really saying like, yeah, man, I really feel that. You know, if I was in your position, I would feel so fucked up and so insecure as well. The fact that you're still willing to go put yourself out there is pretty damn remarkable. And I just want to say, kudos, I have your back. That to me is authentic self-love and communication with self that allows us to not put the light at the end of the tunnel, but bring it back to where we are and lead with compassionate action in spite of the things that are still growing and evolving as time goes on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like the child analogy because I've never gone to therapy. I have a friend who's a therapist, and we talk a lot about I don't know the term for it, but just the childhood approach, you know, your inner child and all that. And I think it's so powerful because a lot of the limits that we put on ourselves, we weren't born with those. They're learned behaviors. And at some point you picked them up from having an insecurity. And I think as two people here who have kind of cultivated a very strong self-love atmosphere and have honestly fucking worked pretty hard at it, can you speak a little bit about what your opinion is on outside judgment and how you kind of navigate that and don't let it bother you? Because we all deal with outside judgment at some point. And I think it's fair to say that me and you don't really give a shit about it anymore. So
that's great. I'll flip the question around on you and say, like, what are a few tools that you found really useful for navigating that judgment? Because it's super different for everyone.
That is very true. And that's why I think conversations like these are great, because you get to hear, you know, the only voice we hear most of the time is the voice in our head. So it's great to hear other people's perspectives. So I think for me, I, for the longest time, would try and be the person that I thought I should be to get other people to like me. And now I take the approach of I've been introspective enough, and I kind of have my life dream and life nightmare dialed down to where I know what I want to do, and I know how I want to show up. And I don't really give a shit how people feel about that, because if they're not paying my bills, it doesn't matter. And as long as I'm being the most authentic and truest version of myself, then whoever I attract down the line is going to be dope, and they're going to fit right into my life, you know, without even trying. And I think that and I say this a lot, process over outcome, not worrying about how you show up, but being true to yourself, the rest will just take care of itself. And that's honestly how we became friends, is I just kind of put myself out there, and the people that I attract back over the past year, I mean, since I've been really diving deep on this type of stuff, it's been pretty rad.
I love that you say just put yourself out there and stay true to you and know there's nobody's paying your bills, and it doesn't fucking matter what they think. It's so true, man. I love that perspective, and it shows in who you are and the way that you lead. So fucking epic, man. And the connection that we've cultivated as a result of you putting yourself out there was a huge blessing to my life, and I'm super grateful for it. It's just fucking rad. So I would say in response to judgment, I have the approach of going right into it. Like, be hurt, be upset, be pissed off. Like, know that you have the right to feel that, because we live in a cold world, right? I'll call myself out right now with this double standard. I love to give out shit and just like make fun of people. But if somebody makes fun of me, I'm like, oh God, you know what I mean? Because that's who I am. I'm an innocent heart. And I think letting that be okay and being like, okay, cool. You know what? Dang. I do feel insecure when that person calls me out, or I do feel a little bit afraid when somebody starts teasing me, right? With the other conjunct part of ourselves, it's like, I don't give a fuck about that. I'm solid and whole in myself, right? I think affirming both and marrying the two, because I think we either get strung out on one or the other. It's like, oh, I don't give a fuck about what anyone says. Or I'm like, oh my God, people love me, please. If you can say, cool, like the part who doesn't give a fuck needs to go hang out with the part who's really insecure more often, because they need to balance each other out. And I think that's where judgment really is a great tool for learning. If you can balance out like, oh man, I did feel hurt by that situation, but I'm going to go show up and say, look, that was hurtful to me. And I also want to absolve you from the responsibility of needing to do anything for me to make me feel good. It's like, oh, cool, we have balance here. It's like, I was hurt, I own that shit, and also I would request in the future treatment that is aligned with X, Y, and Z that would make me feel better, right? So if you have the courage to be like, yeah, that fucking sucked, and the wisdom to say, yeah, also, by the way, just like as a side note, my reaction has nothing to do with you, so you don't have to worry about it. But I'm going to just say this because it's helpful for me to own my shit. That is a real relationship, you know? The problems are outside of the love that's present.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that. And I guess on the same type of subject, I kind of want to wrap this up and ask you one final question that kind of fits along with what we were talking about, as far as, honoring your past shitty experiences, if you want to call it that. So my question to you, and you can get as personal or non-personal as you want. I know we're both kind of open books, but what is the best, worst thing that has ever happened to you?
Yeah, I know this one right off the bat. Actually, there are two things. I would say my parents' divorce. That's a global picture. Like if you were to look at the one thing that really fucked everything up and made me better than I've ever been before, it's my parents' divorce for sure. If there's one particular moment that stung the most, that in retrospect, I'm so grateful didn't go through because of what it inspired in me, that would be when I dropped out of college. I was in love with a girl, well, call it in love or perhaps just really codependent with a very good friend of mine in high school. And I came back from school and I felt like, oh my God, I got to tell this chick that I've been in love with her for like 5 years. And so I did. And she was like, oh my God, me too. And I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. This is going to be sick. It's finally happening. And I just felt like within a couple weeks, it was very clear that it wasn't going to work out. I felt really hurt by that. And I was just devastated. I was devastated to my core. I was like, not only did college work out, now I'm back home. I don't even have a job yet. The relationship I was hoping to work out didn't happen. I was like, fuck me. This is so unfair. This is unbelievably cold on behalf of the universe. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, finally, I just needed a little break and I didn't get it. So what that inspired for me, man, was I had to sit with my shit and all the darkness and all the unresolved emotion from my childhood for the next 3 years as a barista, basically smoking pot, going home, meditating, going to work, rinse, wash, repeat. And when I was in that state of being high, I was just going through endless rage and anger and frustration and sadness and sorrow. And it was deep shit, man. But I'll tell you what, I'm better for it. I'm light years more confident and comfortable when life throws shit my way. And to speak of judgment, it really opened up for me. It's like, look, dude, none of these emotions are yours to begin with. They're things you empath from the collective of the world, things that your family has struggled with for generations. And you're here as the fucking final stop in this thing. So of course it's going to suck. Of course it's going to be painful. But you're going to be able to emerge from this experience and say, you know what? I fucking confronted that shit right on. And literally, it only made me the best I've ever been. So I have to say thank you to life for throwing all this shit circumstance my way. Because in the midst of it, there was tremendous abundance, there was grace, and there was a whole lot of love. So if I can balance and recognize those things in the presence of the shit that I don't want to deal with, life becomes a perfect balance of joy and frustration, and the two together make gold. So why not go for it and commit?
Hell yeah, dude. And I just wanted to say congratulations to you on actually doing the work and coming through and having the mindset you do, because it's funny, again, another similarity. I dropped out of college, and if you had to ask me, my best, worst thing that ever happened would probably be something around a girl too. So another similarity that we have too that I had no idea about. So
Dude, amazing.
yeah, dude, awesome stuff. I just wanted to also say thank you for, spending some time with me and answering some questions. And I just wanted to give you a second if you wanted to kind of tell people a little bit more personal to you, what you're about and where people can find you online and whatnot.
Well, first of all, man, our friendship means so much to me. For those who don't know, Bobby and I met through my most recent challenge, and immediately I got a great vibe from Bobby, and what we've been able to cultivate in the friendship and what will continue from this is going to be a beautiful, beautiful interchange of personal growth, expansion, and commitment to a craft that can be very frustrating, very difficult, but also just provides so much reward. So And knowing Bobby as a fucking OG goalie, as a fucking OG woodcutter, fucking lumberjack, and a strong man. I gotta say, Bobby, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's been a pleasure. Um, for people who are interested, Organic Health Movement is my platform. The vision is to create a united movement of inspired self-masters that lead with compassionate action and relentless self-love. I do so through coaching my clients in the physical, mental, and emotional tenets of embodied well-being as an extension of nutrition coaching, functional medicine, corrective movement, and inner emotional work. So you can find me on Instagram, Organic Health Movement, Facebook, Organic Health Movement, YouTube, Xavi Donabedian, and my website is organic, I think it's underscore now, or is it dot? You can find it in the link in my bio, AKA my Instagram. My Instagram is my go-to. That's where I share the most information. And of course, my website itself details my services in a much greater array. But ultimately, my whole purpose is just to have fun. I don't really give a shit about anything but having fun. And if I'm not having fun, then it's not worth it. And just to know that fun is the way has been tremendously liberating. And I'm right there with you, Bobby, man. We're fucking in the trenches and we're making it happen.
Hell yeah. And I can speak to the fact that you're on your Instagram, you're always dropping nuggets of wisdom on the stories daily. So definitely check out Xavi there. And I'm sure we will be talking again sometime in the future on multiple topics. So I appreciate it and hope you have a good one, Xavi.
Bobby, man, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.